it was Christmas Eve when everything changed. The night we stopped singing carols, stopped hanging ornaments, and stopped pretending the stories weren't true. For years, we've tried to forget what happened to Grandma, but every December, the haunting jingle of bells reminds me that some legends are real. Grandma had always been the heart of our holiday celebrations, the keeper of traditions that seemed quaint, if not outright strange. She insisted on hanging hand-carved ornaments, baking ancestral recipes, and performing rituals none of us understood. But that year, she was different. Her usually bright eyes were shadowed with worry, and she spent hours gazing out the window at the snow-laden woods behind our house, her fingers tightly gripping a peculiar talisman. It was handmade, a bundle of twisted antlers entwined with red ribbon and bound together with twine. When I asked her about it, she shook her head. "You wouldn't understand, child," she whispered. "You've forgotten the old ways." The old ways, her term for the customs passed down through generations. Practices like never singing carols after dark, keeping a candle lit in the window all night, and leaving a plate of raw liver outside before bedtime. She insisted these rituals protected us from ancient forces best left undisturbed. As the snow fell heavier and Christmas approached, Grandma's behavior grew increasingly anxious. She cautioned us not to sing carols too loudly, not to let our voices carry into the night. She pleaded with my father to board up the windows, to seal the house against Vildren. "Who is Vildren?" I asked, unease creeping into my voice. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and urgency. "He is the winter hunter, an ancient spirit who punishes those who neglect the old ways. When the veil is thinnest on Christmas Eve, he walks among us." We exchanged glances, my parents and I. They dismissed her tales as the ramblings of an old woman clinging to fading traditions, but something in her tone unsettled me. Christmas Eve unfolded as it always did, or so we tried to make it. The fireplace crackled warmly, and the scent of spiced cider filled the air. The family gathered in the living room, sharing stories and unwrapping a few early presents. Despite Grandma's warnings, we began to sing carols, our voices filling the cozy space. Grandma sat in her rocking chair, her posture rigid, clutching her talisman so tightly her knuckles were white. I noticed her lips moving, not in song, but as if she were muttering a prayer or a spell. "Let's sing Silent Night next," my cousin shouted, and everyone cheered. "No!" Grandma's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Not tonight. No more singing." An uncomfortable silence fell. Her eyes darted toward the windows, and I could see the reflection of the flickering candlelight in her fearful gaze. "Mom, please," my father said gently. "It's just a song. We're all together. Let's enjoy the evening." "It's not just a song," she insisted, standing up shakily. "You're inviting him. You're drawing Vildren here." We all stared at her, a mix of concern and irritation. My mother tried to guide her back to her chair. "Let's sit down and relax, okay?" But Grandma pulled away, her expression resolute. "If you won't heed my warnings, then I must protect you myself." With that, she headed toward the front door. "Grandma, where are you going?" I called after her. "To do what must be done," she replied without turning back, slipping out into the frigid night. Worried, I grabbed my coat and hurried after her. "Wait." Outside, the wind bit at my face, and the snow muffled my footsteps. I followed her tracks, which led toward the edge of the woods. "Grandma," I shouted. She stopped and turned to face me. "Go back inside," she urged. "It's not safe out here." "Not without you," I insisted. "Please, come back." Before she could respond, a sound pierced the night, the faint jingling of bells, but not the cheerful kind associated with sleighs and Santa. This was discordant, eerie. Grandma's face paled. "He's here," she whispered. A sense of dread washed over me. Who? Vildren. Then I saw them, massive hoofprints appearing in the snow around us, forming a circle. The air grew heavy, and a low growl resonated from the darkness between the trees. Emerging from the shadows, Vildren stepped into the dim light, a towering reindeer-like creature, but grotesque and menacing. His antlers were twisted and sharp, adorned with tattered ribbons and bones. His eyes glowed a deep crimson, filled with ancient malice. Grandma held up her talisman, chanting words in a language I didn't recognize. "By the old ways, I bind you," Vildren snorted, a cloud of icy vapor enveloping us. "You cannot bind me, elder," he snarled, his voice a guttural rumble that seemed to emanate from the forest itself. "Take me," she pleaded. "Spare them." "Grandma, no," I cried, reaching out to her. But Vildren moved with terrifying speed. He charged, and in an instant, his antlers struck her talisman, shattering it into fragments. She collapsed to the ground, and I rushed to her side, tears blurring my vision. Vildren loomed over us, and I braced myself for the end. But then he paused, his gaze shifting from me to the shattered talisman. "The old ways are dying," he said softly, almost sadly. "Their protection fades." He began to retreat into the darkness. "Wait," I shouted, anger and fear mixing within me. "Why are you doing this?" He glanced back, his eyes piercing. "Because balance must be restored. Forgetting has a price." And then he was gone, swallowed by the night. I cradled Grandma in my arms. She was breathing, but barely. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I tried to keep you safe." "Don't talk," I urged. "We'll get help." Her hand gripped mine weakly. "Remember the old ways," she said. "Promise me." "I promise," I replied, tears streaming down my face. Her eyes closed, and a peaceful expression settled over her features. Her grip loosened, and I knew she was gone. Staggering back to the house, I burst through the door. "Call an ambulance," I screamed. My parents rushed over, horror crossing their faces as they saw the blood and my tear-streaked face. "What happened?" my mother gasped. "Grandma, she's hurt. Please, hurry!" We returned to the spot, but she was gone. Only the fragments of the talisman remained, scattered in the snow. My parents looked at me with confusion and concern. "She was right here," I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. "Vildren, he took her." They exchanged worried glances. "We need to get you inside," my father said gently. "You're in shock." The police were called, and a search was conducted, but no trace of Grandma was found. The hoof prints had been erased by the falling snow, and without evidence they concluded she had wandered off and succumbed to the elements. But I knew better. That night, I sat by the window, clutching the broken pieces of her talisman. In the distance, I heard the faint jingle of bells, and knew that Vildren was still out there. Over the following days, I tried to explain what had happened, but no one believed me. They attributed my account to grief and trauma. Determined to honor Grandma's memory, I began to observe the old ways. I left a plate of raw liver on the porch, kept a candle lit in the window, and refrained from singing carols after dark. My parents humored me at first, thinking it part of my coping process, but then strange things started to happen. Hoof prints appeared around the house, and the distant sound of bells echoed on the wind. My parents grew uneasy, though they tried to hide it. One morning, we found a package on the doorstep. Inside was a single antler wrapped in red ribbon, accompanied by a note in shaky handwriting. "He watches." honor the old ways. My parents could no longer deny that something was amiss. We began to follow Grandma's traditions meticulously, and the unsettling occurrences lessened.